Los Angeles, July 1972. Inside a private martial arts studio tucked away on a quiet street in Culver City, six people are about to witness something that will never be officially recorded, never be commercially filmed, never make it into any documentary or authorized biography. What happens in the next 43 minutes will change how two of the most legendary martial artists in history understand their own craft and each other. The space itself feels sacred. High ceilings swallow sound. Windows covered with thick canvas cloth keep the California sun from reaching the polished wooden floor. The air smells of sweat, liniment oil, and the faint metallic tang of athletic tape. No photographs, no cameras, no press. Just six witnesses whose names would remain unspoken for decades, bound by an agreement so simple it needed no signature. What you see here stays here. Bruce Lee stands near the center of the room, 31 years old, 5 feet 7 inches, 135 pounds of precisely calibrated speed and power. He wears simple black training pants and no shirt, revealing the kind of musculature that looks carved rather than built. Every fiber visible beneath skin that gleams under the studio's overhead lights. His movements are economical, almost lazy, as he rolls his shoulders and stretches his wrists. But his eyes are alert, constantly processing, reading the space and the energy within it like text on a page. Chuck Norris stands opposite him, 32 years old, 5 feet 10 inches, 170 pounds of combat-tested experience. He wears his traditional white GI pants, the fabric worn soft from years of training. His upper body is bare, showing the broad shoulders and thick chest of someone built for endurance and impact. Where Bruce moves with coiled tension, Chuck moves with patient confidence, the kind that comes from winning 6 world karate championships and teaching martial arts to some of the most dangerous men in Los Angeles. They've worked together before. Chuck played the villain in The Way of the Dragon, filmed just months earlier in Rome on that set. Their fight scene in the Colosseum became the stuff of immediate legend, not because of camera tricks or clever editing, but because what audiences saw was as real as choreography could get without actual violence. The respect between them was mutual, professional, genuine. But this isn't a movie set. This is something else entirely. The 4 other witnesses sit against the far wall, silent. 2 of Bruce's private students, one of Chuck's longtime training partners, and Dan Inosanto, Bruce's closest friend and teaching assistant. The man who helped arrange this moment. None of them speak. They understand the gravity of what's been agreed upon. This isn't an exhibition. This isn't a demonstration for students or a performance for cameras. This is a private conversation conducted entirely through movement, a dialogue between philosophies, between systems, between 2 men who've reached the absolute peak of their respective disciplines and want to see, without ego or audience, what truth emerges when those disciplines meet. The rules are simple. No rules. Full contact allowed, but control maintained. No techniques forbidden. No strategies off limits. They'll go until they both agree to stop, or until someone can continue. No winner declared, no loser acknowledged. Just exploration. Pure, honest, dangerous. Bruce speaks first, his voice carrying that distinctive rhythm, part Hong Kong accent, part Hollywood sharpness, part philosophical precision. You ready to see what works? Chuck's response is quieter, almost gentle. I think we're both about to learn something. They bow. Not the formal bow of competition, but the deeper bow of mutual respect, the kind warriors offer each other before testing the very limits of what they've spent their lives building. And then they move. The first exchange happens so fast that 2 of the witnesses will later disagree about what they actually saw. Bruce closes distance with that explosive forward burst he's famous for, the one that covers 6 feet in the time it takes most people to blink. His lead hand snaps toward Chuck's face, not a full power strike but a rangefinder, testing reaction time. Chuck's response is immediate. He doesn't retreat. He angles his body 30 degrees, letting the strike whisper past his cheek while his own counterpunch drives toward Bruce's exposed ribs. But Bruce isn't there anymore. He's already pivoted, already resetting, already moving into the next possibility. They separate circle, eyes locked. The witnesses hold their breath. For the next 17 minutes, the room becomes a laboratory. Bruce works his angles using footwork that seems to defy physics. Forward, lateral, backward, forward again, all without visible preparation or telegraphing. His hands flicker like strobes, strikes coming from impossible trajectories. He's testing Chuck's defense, probing for patterns, looking for the microsecond gaps that all systems have. Chuck absorbs the pressure with a different kind of intelligence. He doesn't try to match Bruce's speed. Instead, he controls distance, using his longer reach and heavier frame to cut off angles. To make Bruce work through obstacles, when he strikes, it's with devastating commitment. Full hip rotation, complete body unity, the kind of power that comes from traditional karate's emphasis on maximum force delivery. Several times, his fists and feet pass within millimeters of Bruce's head and body, close enough that the witnesses can hear the air displacement. But nothing lands clean. Both men are too good for that, too experienced, too aware. Around the 18-minute mark, something shifts. The pace slows, not from exhaustion, but from mutual recognition. They've moved beyond technique demonstration into something deeper, a conversation about timing, about energy management, about what actually works when two masters stop performing and start problem solving. Bruce begins integrating grappling, not traditional kung fu locks, but wrestling-based controls influenced by his study of judo and his famous friendship with Jean LaBelle. He shoots for Chuck's legs, transitions to clinch work, tries to drag the fight into the realm where size and strength matter more than speed. Chuck adapts. He sprawls, he underhooks. He uses his wrestling background from his military days to counter the takedown attempts. When they tie up, his power advantage becomes obvious. He can move Bruce more easily than Bruce can move him. But Bruce's sensitivity to pressure points and joint angles means that even in disadvantaged positions, he's never truly controlled. They break apart again, both breathing harder now, sweat darkening their training pants, skin flushed with exertion and the adrenaline of extended high-intensity engagement. Dan Inosanto shifts forward slightly, concern flickering across his face. This has gone longer than anyone expected. Both men are operating at a level of intensity that most professional fighters can't maintain for more than minutes. They're approaching half an hour, but neither Bruce nor Chuck shows any intention of stopping. At 23 minutes, Chuck changes strategy. He starts throwing low kicks, Thai-style round kicks to Bruce's lead leg. The kind of strikes that accumulate damage, that slow footwork, that turn mobility into liability. The first one lands with a sound like a baseball bat hitting leather. Bruce's leg buckles slightly, but he doesn't retreat. Instead, he adjusts his stance, lifts his lead leg higher, and starts checking the kicks with his shin. A technique he's been experimenting with after studying Muay Thai fighters. The sound of shin-on-shin contact echoes through the studio, once, twice, 3 times. It's the kind of collision that would break bones if either man miscalculated by even a centimeter. But they don't miscalculate. Bruce counters with oblique kicks to Chuck's knee. Small, precise, disrupting strikes designed to damage structure rather than create dramatic impact. Chuck responds by changing levels, shooting in for a takedown that Bruce barely sprawls out of. They end up in a scramble on the floor. A tangle of limbs and leverage, both trying to secure dominant position. Chuck achieves top control for maybe 4 seconds. But Bruce's hip mobility and spatial awareness let him create just enough angle to slip out. To reset to standing, they're both up again, breathing heavily now, sweat dripping onto the wooden floor. 31 minutes. One of the witnesses later described this section as watching two languages merge into one dialect. Bruce's linear efficiency and Chuck's circular power started blending. Bruce began using more rotational force in his strikes. Chuck began moving with less preparatory motion. They were downloading each other's software in real time, each man's nervous system absorbing lessons that would normally take years to integrate. At 34 minutes, something dangerous almost happens. Chuck throws a spinning back kick, a technique he's legendary for. It's fast, it's precise, and it's aimed at Bruce's midsection with enough force to break ribs. Bruce sees it coming, but barely. He deflects with his forearm, but the impact sends him stumbling backward 3 steps. For half a second, genuine worry crosses Chuck's face. Did he miscalculate? Did he hit too hard? But Bruce is already resetting. He shakes out his arm, rolls his shoulder, and his expression breaks into that famous Bruce Lee grin, the one that's half amusement, half respect. Good. Very good. Chuck doesn't smile back, but something softens in his eyes. Relief, maybe? Or recognition that they're both operating right at the edge of control, right where technique borders on actual combat. They agree without words to dial it back. Not by much, just enough. The next phase becomes more technical, more exploratory. They start combining techniques that shouldn't work together but somehow do. Bruce throws a punch that transitions mid-movement into an elbow. Chuck counters with a knee that becomes a sweep. They're improvising now, creating hybrid movements that exist in the space between their different systems. Dan Inosanto will later say this section was the most valuable, not because of the techniques themselves, but because of what it demonstrated about adaptation, about abandoning style loyalty in favor of effectiveness. about the difference between doing martial arts and understanding combat. At 40 minutes, both men are moving slower, not from injury, but from accumulated fatigue. Even the best conditioned athletes can't maintain maximum output indefinitely. But the intensity hasn't then dropped. If anything, the mental engagement has increased. Every movement now carries more weight, more consequence. They're making decisions with microseconds of processing time, reading each other's intentions through subtle weight shifts and breathing patterns. Chuck catches Bruce with a body punch, not hard enough to cause damage, but solid enough that Bruce's exhalation is audible across the room. Bruce responds immediately with a front kick to Chuck's thigh that makes the bigger man's stance temporarily falter. They're accumulating these small victories, these minor advantages, without keeping score or claiming superiority, because that's not what this is about. 42 minutes. They're both standing in the center of the room, maybe 4 feet apart, hands dropped slightly, breathing hard. Neither has spoken since the session began. The witnesses haven't moved. The covered windows keep the outside world completely separate from this moment. Bruce raises his hand, not in surrender, in acknowledgement. Chuck mirrors the gesture, and just like that, it's over. They don't collapse. They don't celebrate. They walk toward each other and embrace, the kind of hug that exists between people who just shared something profound. Chuck's hand grips the back of Bruce's neck. Bruce's hands press against Chuck's sweat-soaked back. They stay like that for maybe 10 seconds, saying nothing because nothing needs to be said. When they separate, both men are smiling, real smiles, the kind that come from genuine satisfaction. Bruce speaks first, his voice rough from exertion. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for, way stronger." Chuck's response is immediate. "You're faster than physics should allow. I still don't understand how you move like that. Because I don't think about moving, I just move. Maybe that's what I need to learn." They walk to the side of the studio where towels and water wait. As they wipe sweat and catch their breath, Dan Inosanto approaches. His expression is complicated. Pride, concern, awe, all mixed together. He struggles for the word. "That was different than anything I've seen either of you do." Bruce nods, drinking deeply from a water bottle. "Because we weren't performing. We weren't proving, we were just exploring." Chuck adds, "No ego, no style, just what works." One of the other witnesses, a senior student of Chuck's named Jim, finally speaks. "Are you guys going to do this again?" Both men look at each other. Then, almost simultaneously, they shake their heads. Bruce explains, "This only works once. You do it again, and ego creeps in. You start preparing. You start thinking about strategy instead of just responding. The purity disappears." Chuck agrees. This was about discovery. You can't discover the same thing twice. Over the next 20 minutes, as both men cool down and stretch, they discuss what they learned. Bruce talks about how Chuck's power forced him to rethink his distance management. How traditional karate's commitment to full-force striking created opportunities he hadn't anticipated. Chuck talks about how Bruce's constant angle changes and speed forced him to abandon his usual rhythm. How fighting someone who doesn't move like anyone else requires complete presence. No assumptions, no predictions, just response. Danny Nosanto takes notes. Not detailed technique breakdowns, but conceptual observations. He understands that what happened in this room will influence both men's teaching for the rest of their lives, which, tragically, won't be as long as anyone expects. Bruce Lee will die in just over a year, July 1973, 32 years old. The official cause will be debated for decades, but what's certain is that his influence will explode exponentially after his death. His philosophy of martial arts, formless, adaptable, honest, will become foundational to modern combat sports. And embedded in that philosophy, known only to the 6 people in this room, is the influence of 43 minutes spent testing truth with Chuck Norris. Chuck will continue teaching, continue competing, continue evolving. He'll transition to an acting career that makes him a household name, but in interviews decades later, when asked about Bruce Lee, his expression always changes, becomes more thoughtful, more reverent. He'll never tell the full story of this day. The agreement holds. But he'll say, "Bruce understood fighting in a way that most people never do, not as combat, as communication." The 6 witnesses file out of the studio one by one as evening settles over Los Angeles. They shake hands with both men. No one asks to come back. No one asks when it might happen again. They understand they've witnessed something unrepeatable, a moment of pure martial truth, untainted by commerce or ego or the need to establish dominance. The last person out is Dan Inosanto. He turns back at the door, looking at Bruce and Chuck as they continue talking, still processing what they learned. He commits the image to memory. Two legends sitting on a wooden floor, having just pushed each other to the absolute limits of their abilities, laughing about the techniques that almost worked and the strategies that failed completely. Friends equals teachers teaching each other. The door closes. The studio falls silent except for their voices. Outside, Los Angeles continues its evening routine. Traffic, conversations, the ordinary machinery of a major city. Inside, two men sit in the aftermath of something extraordinary, something that will never be commodified or commercialized, something that will exist only in memory, and whispered stories among people who understand what it means to pursue mastery without compromise. 43 minutes that changed everything. 43 minutes that almost no one will ever know about. But you know about it now. You've been given access to something private, something sacred in the martial arts community. So the question becomes, what do you do with this knowledge? Do you see this as entertainment, a cool story about famous people doing remarkable things? Or do you see it as a lesson about what's possible when ego is removed from the equation? Because here's what most people miss. Bruce and Chuck could have filmed this, could have commercialized it, could have turned it into the biggest martial arts event in history. The money alone would have been staggering, but they chose not to. They chose purity over profit, truth over spectacle, learning over legacy. When's the last time you made that choice? When's the last time you did something purely for the growth it offered, with no concern about who would see or what credit you receive? Most people never do. Most people need an audience to validate their actions, need recognition to confirm their worth, need external proof that what they're doing matters. Bruce and Chuck didn't. They spent 43 minutes in a room with 6 witnesses, testing themselves against each other, learning lessons that would inform their teaching for years. And they asked for nothing in return except the experience itself. That's mastery, not the techniques, not the speed or power, but the willingness to grow privately, to challenge yourself without spectators, to pursue truth even when no one's watching. The studio was locked after they left. The windows remained covered. The wooden floor held the faint scent of sweat and effort, the only evidence that something extraordinary had occurred. 43 minutes of pure martial truth. 6 witnesses who kept their promise. 2 legends who understood that some moments are too sacred to sell. And now you carry that story forward. What you do with it reveals everything about whether you understand what mastery actually costs and whether you're willing to pay the price when no one's keeping score.